Men sometimes think that it's wrong if they don't climax every time. They avoid asking for help because they don't want to tell no one that is broken. And what's worse is that their partners are confused and start blaming themselves. So men there'll be a sexual dysfunction associated with the men, like the men are dealing with it. There are a lot of different sources for misinformation, right? Again, we talked about media, we talked about porn, we talked about your friends, and right, and this the online social media sphere in of itself. But understanding that when you find out who you need to go see, right, like the appropriate people you need to talk to, it will do a world of wonders of suddering, like, kind of sifting through all of the clutter that is available to you, unfortunately, in this day and age. All right, can you believe that over 70% of men, at least according to his most recent survey, believe at least one false inaccuracy associated with the male orgasm? And if you talk to a lot of the male patients, and I talk to a lot of the male patients, it helps shape how they think about themselves, how they think about relationships. More importantly, it shapes like how they just move. And I'm here at least kind of say out loud what are some of these myths, because again, you come here, misinformation, disinformation. I feel like if I can kind of help move you guys in the right direction, not only will it help your personal life, your mental life, your love life and relationship, a lot more people will benefit, right? So today we're going to talk about male orgasm related myths and what you need to do if you hear about it. And hopefully we can debunk some of those things so you don't have to think about them again. All right, so I want to talk about this. As an internist, I think one of the issues that I faced, especially when I was doing outpatient medicine, when I would have a male patient, right? And I've said this before on the platform, one of the main reasons why men would come to see me is that they would have a loved one who said, hey, yeah, you know what, you need to go see a doctor. I haven't seen a doctor in 10 years. Or there's some issue associated with sexual related health, right? Where they couldn't get it up, or erection was hurting, whatever. It was something in regards to sex. So I know it's important to men, right? So we don't have to like argue back and forth if it's an important conversation. It definitely is. Because again, if it wasn't some family member saying, hey, you need to go see the doctor, that was a likely reason that they were coming to see me, because unfortunately they weren't coming to see me for their routine regular checkups. But when we talk about these issues associated with the misinformation associated with the male orgasm, like where did they get this from? Because I think that's important. Like, where do you get your information that is steering you in the wrong direction? Because I say this all the time, whether you're online, whether you friends, or where you get your information from is going to be so important, because it can be life or death situation. When we talked about COVID, we talked a lot about the fact that, especially for my men, when I would say like, hey, you know what, big issue of COVID is you could cause some erectile dysfunction. Oh man, they were ready to go and jump on that vaccine then because they did not want any issue with the sexual dysfunction associated with the disease. So let's talk about where people get their wrong information from, and then we can kind of move in that direction of like, how do we debunk it, right? So first and foremost, the media, right? We know the media in movies, there's a way that men typically get satisfied. There's a way that men orgasm, whether it's like loud and obnoxious. I've seen online sometimes on social media where like they'll make fun of men who are quiet with the orgasms, right? Because again, the general media perception is that like it has to be loud and boisterous. Porn is a big one. Porn is a big one, right? And again, I'm not here to, point a finger or two as far as what type of porn you're watching, how much porn you're watching. We're not here to do that. But we do know that men typically will follow, right? They follow what they see. So if they don't see, or they don't feel that, hey, you know what, I don't orgasm, or my stuff doesn't work like the way that person works, they start feeling insecure about themselves, right? Again, which is sometimes why they end up seeing, doctors in the office, because they say, hey, you know what, like my ejaculation isn't that strong, like, my sexual desire isn't that strong. There's a lot of things that they look at and they see other men do, even though they won't admit it. They look at it and they see what other men do and they say, you know what, I don't do it that way, so something must be wrong with me. And I think the last and not least, friends and unfortunately social media, right? Like the way we are misinformed on a slew of different problems, right? You best believe that it's going to run amok when we talk about the dysfunction associated with male orgasm, and just really more importantly, sexual health, right? Because that's really what this conversation is about today. Like, yes, we're going to focus on the male orgasm because I know that's going to get people to stop scrolling and say, hey, you know what is Dr. Pierre talking about today? But sexual health is such an important conversation because it's something that isn't done enough, especially for men. Typically the women, because of, they're usually more following up their routine visits. It just kind of goes hand in hand. For the men, because, we're not seeing the doctor as often, where we have our bride to ourselves. So even if we have some type of sexual dysfunction, we won't come out and say it, or we'll try to put put it off as long as possible, a lot of times it's very difficult to kind of have these conversations. So, but I know if I say something like, hey, you know what, male orgasm myths, guess what? They come running, right? So again, shout out to you guys for doing that. So what I want to talk about here, right, is men sometimes think that it's wrong if they don't climax every time. They avoid asking for help because they don't want to tell no one that is broken. And what's worse is that their partners are confused and start blaming themselves. So men there'll be a sexual dysfunction associated with the men, like the men are dealing with it. There are a lot of different sources for misinformation, right? Again, we talked about media, we talked about porn, we talked about your friends, and right, and this the online social media sphere in of itself. But understanding that when you find out who you need to go see, right, like the appropriate people you need to talk to, it will do a world of wonders of suddering, like, you know, kind of sifting through all of the clutter that is available to you, unfortunately, in this day and age. All right, so I want to talk about what I learned from the patients I've been taking care of, right? And what are some of the issues that I've seen time and time again, right? So these are some questions that I always ask my men, especially when we're talking about sexual dysfunction, right? And again, these are the things that they sometimes believe, right? We'll start getting into the myths in a minute, but these are some of the things they start to believe. If I don't orgasm, does that mean I'm not attracted to my partner? And again, the reason why I don't orgasm could be like multifactorial why you're not orgasming, right? Or, right, is there substance related reasons, right? You know, whether it be alcohol, whether it be illicit drugs, or just other, not even illicit drugs, other medications that could be adding to it. One of the things, especially when we talk about blood pressure medications, when I talk about metoprolol or beta blockers in general, one of the things I have to tell people, especially by men, is that, hey, you can have issues with erection taking this medication, right? I'm not saying it's 100% guaranteed, but it is a possibility. So if it happens, you know, 8 times out of 10, they don't want the medication at all. If there's a small possibility that erectile dysfunction or just some type of sexual dysfunction is occurred, right? You know, is it true that men always want to have sex, right? This is always a good point too, right? Because you'll hear society say that, you know, men are like horn dogs, right? And they want to have sex everywhere, any day, anytime. So a lot of times when I'm talking to couples and she'll say like, yeah, you know what? He's not as interested in sex as I am, right? And sometimes there is that discordance that, you know, the women, right, or the other partner may want to have more sex than the other guy, right? Like, so it's just important to know that, yes, it does not mean that there is a dysfunction. It does not mean that you're not attracted, right? It's just some people just have different wavelengths when it comes to sexual desire and the need and want to have sex. Again, some people can have sex every day, 3 times a day. Some people are like, all right, 2-3 times a week, I'm good because I got work to do, right? Just, you know, wherever you fall in, you can put it in the comments, right? And this is the important part, right? And I like this. In medical school, and I've talked about this before, in medical school, a lot of times we are trained to focus on obviously like the scientific aspect of it, the scientific aspect of a disease and how it may, from a pathophys perspective, present in our patients. But quite often we are not really tasked with the emotional, the hormonal, or even psychological aspects, especially with men and sexual dysfunction. We're not really honed in on that as we should. So it is important to know that even when you go to see your healthcare provider, they may not necessarily be fully equipped to understand everything that is going on, but they should at least have a good foundation and baseline to know where to point you to, right? Like, and I may not be able to tell you every single hormone test you need to order if you're having some type of sexual dysfunction, especially with your orgasm, but I should be able to point to you, you know, endocrinologist or urologist, someone to follow. I should be able to point you in that direction. I think that's where you start, especially as the healthcare provider. You know, I always say that the healthcare providers are the captain of the ship when it comes to someone's healthcare. If you want to steer them in the right direction, you gotta, one, be confident enough to understand what they are going through, confident enough to understand that, like, hey, like there's some, you know, mental hurdles that they're dealing with, and you're gonna need to help get that support for them, but you're going to get them there and sometimes talk them off a ledge, right? So understand that as a healthcare provider, we got a lot of roles, got a lot of duties, but especially for our men, especially when they get the courage, and I do say courage, when they get the courage enough to go to their doctor to say, hey, I'm having these, you know, sexual related issues, that you're able to kind of help them and then help see a light, right? Because for them, it's all doom and gloom. So let's talk about some of the biggest myths that have come across my table, whether it be like one-on-one or whether it's something I see online that you'll likely hear, or you likely been told that we want to kind of get out the way, right? Men always orgasm during sex, right? So again, according to a study in sexual medicine, 1 in 4 men do not actually orgasm every time, right? And again, lots of different reasons: stress, distraction. Like I talk about medications. Sometimes if there's alcohol or some illicit drugs involved, there are a lot of different reasons why you may not orgasm every single time during sex, right? Is that a problem? No, it's not a problem, right? You just have to try to backtrack to figure out, like, all right, like, how did I get to this point here? Like, what was different about this time that I did not orgasm that I had no problem before? And understanding that, like, all right, if this becomes a consistent thing, right? Because again, every now and then, you know what? Things happen. That's what I like to say. Things happen every now and then. But if you see that it becomes a consistent issue time and time again, guess what? We got to elevate. We got to escalate our, fact-finding mission to figure out, hey, what is going on? So that's one. Number two, if you don't ejaculate, you didn't orgasm, right? So this is an important one as well too. And this is especially for the men who like to really, really watch a lot of porn. And the reason why I say that is because you'll see a lot of men in porn have these huge ejaculates, right? Like huge, right? And certain men, especially if they kind of grow up, they'll start comparing the fact that hey, you know what? My ejaculation isn't as strong as this guy, or sometimes it isn't as much. Sometimes it's a whimper. They start grading themselves, right? Because that's what men do. They start grading themselves and thinking all right, am I less than because this guy can do a lot and it looks like a lot, and am I drinking enough water? They got all these different reasons why that person could do it, but I can't, right? It is related that you ejaculate and orgasm, right? It is related, but it's not a one-time fit all. So yes, you can have an orgasm, but not necessarily ejaculate, right? You can't. That is possible. You can always tell when a man has an orgasm, right? This is always funny, right? Dry orgasms, weak contractions, subtle responses are all normal. Not every man responds the same way, right? That's usually what I tell them, and especially the partners. If you can't orgasm, it means you're not a real man. Now, we kind of talked about this before. Anything that tries to quantify what a real man should already be thrown out, right? Once you start trying to assign different activities to being a real man, and orgasms are only physical for men, right? Again, which is not true, right? Because again, obviously, yes, some great physical components of it, but mental, emotional connection are definitely associated with it. Even though you'll see books where it almost makes it seem like only the women is connected, right? When they have sex, and the men can have sex with multiple women and not feel nothing. That is 100% not true. Let's talk about some traps that I typically see men fall in, right? So, and I guess this is where they end up needing to come see me, right? Ignoring changes, right? Do not assume that it'll just fix itself. But if you see you get to a point where all right, I'm having more and more instances of sex without ejaculation, or more instances, not getting to climax, and more, if you start seeing that start to increase, that should be a ding, ding, ding. That should be a bell that says, hey, you know what? Let me go get this checked out to make sure, right? If I'm having more and more instances where I'm even having difficulty getting it up again, or getting it up in the first place, all right, I might need to go check with Dr. Pierre or somebody's doctor to figure out what is going on, right? This number 2 is the big one, right? Measuring your manhood by performance. Again, like I said, we won't admit it, but we love to compare ourselves to our friends. We love to compare ourselves to these porno stars who are, again, these are experts in their field of what they do. Again, and we talked about this before, keeping a secret, right? Silence views shame. Talk to your partner, talk to your doctor, talk to someone. If things aren't the same, if things aren't changing, if things don't feel right, you got to talk to someone. I want you to go to that doctor's office voluntarily and say, hey, doc, I haven't been seen in a while, and I got some issues going on. And even if you do the thing that I know y'all love to do, what typically happens, especially for my men in the office, and especially for my healthcare providers who may not know if men are trying to open up more, is, you go, they'll do a routine visit. It'll be a routine visit. Then you say, hey, is there any questions or concerns? They say, nah, doc, I'm good. And then you try to leave the room and they say, hey, doc, one more, right? Whenever I hear a hey, doc, one more question, the likelihood that it's going to be something that they thought was taboo, but they didn't really want to tell you, but you did enough during the conversation to kind of earn their trust, and now they're willing to tell you, skyrockets, right? And a lot of times it's, hey, doc, I've been having some issues, right? let's make sure we get this wrapped up right. Again, understanding that when it comes to men's sexual health, the orgasm is important, right? We're not downplaying it. We're not downplaying it, but understand that within the orgasm, there's a lot of truths and mistruths or untruths that you have heard that we want you to kind of get up out of there. I just watched Dr. Pierre's show and he said that don't even make sense. Like he said, get that out of my vocabulary. He says, don't even like try to connect the two. That's what I want you to do here, right? So understand that yes, we have some issues, some myths, some untruths associated with the orgasm that again can be very detrimental to yourself, to your mental, to your emotional well-being, to your partner's mental and emotional well-being, right? To the success of a relationship. Yeah, it could be that serious, but it won't get to that point unless you open up and say, hey, doc, I have an issue, or hey, partner, like I'm having this issue and it's not you, it's me. Because, we don't want to blame ourselves. It's not you, it's me. And then find that healthcare provider who can steer you in the right direction to get you to where you need to get to make sure that everyone is happy in the bedroom or wherever you like to do your thing at, right? So again, I'm yours truly, Dr. Barry Pierre. I'm going to see you guys next week.